Previously on Heroes Behind the Badge, Chief Joe Morris shared his first-hand account of 9/11, mobilizing from LaGuardia, arriving at Ground Zero, and surviving the collapse of the South Tower. By the end of that morning, with the superintendent and other chiefs lost inside the towers, Joe found himself the senior surviving officer designated to command the Port Authority Police response. In Part 2, Joe continues his story. We'll hear how he led through the recovery operation, the proudest and most tragic moments of his career, and how he helped rebuild both a department and the lives of the men and women who served under him.
So at 11:30 a.m., after this is a couple hours now after the towers have collapsed, the chaos still ongoing at the site, obviously. What were the first actions you took? I mean, that's a great responsibility at a time of chaos, at a time of tragedy. What were you thinking? What did you do?
Well, when I got after the first South Tower came down and getting back, I thought of words from 1993 because I responded with Chief Knoxley, and it was the chief operations officer at the time. And I said to him, well, Chief, what do you do now? And he said, Joe, you got to look at this like it's a tidal wave. Our job is to survive and to bring order to chaos. And it's pushing myself off the floor of the bus. That's what was in my mind, bringing order to chaos. So the first thing is to get who we had left, who was coming out of the dust, where to go. And we went a further couple blocks north after the second tower went, because you had again, to get people together, we met at the Manhattan Borough Community College was located there. And they had a small auditorium where all Port Authority people came in. It was loud, it was cops, people from all over. And at that point, I raised my voice and I said, whoa, enough, sit down. We got to get together here. And what I told them to do, break up aviation, tunnels and bridges, civilian, from the financial, break into your groups because we got to get this in order. So that was the first. Then with the police, I went out on the street. I saw Chief Hall, Bob Belfiore, inspector, and I said, "We're going to move up to the college's gymnasium because it was open. He actually had doctors there and nurses setting up. But we went in, and it was a great location because it had seating. It was parking, and it had bathrooms and water and everything we needed. And it was a central place we could get people in. So you're talking to about 1 o'clock people. We finally gathered maybe 300 cops. When the buildings came down, Port Authority Police and the response had 400 police officers down there at the thing. So we had, disappearing. So we started then. Again, you asked what? I had the detective sergeant with me, Tony Fitzgerald. I thought, Tony, get your detectives who come here. And I want you to go get somebody over the morgue. And I had heard that the city had set up a command post up here, 92. So we sent somebody up there. I sent the detective over to the New York police headquarters. They had set up, they have on their floor, they had a command post. Actually, at one point, before 11:30, I actually drove over there with two detectives and put a detective over there to see what was going on because I knew we needed a presence there. So we had a presence there, and then I drove back. That's when you talk about things. I went to get my car where I had parked it. My car literally was incinerated. The only thing left was the steel. Even the rubber tires were burned off of it, just the steel. No peat. That caught my attention.
I guess so.
Because that's the things that you come back. So I went back to the gymnasium, and that's when 11:30 I was designated. So I started breaking down the cops. I told them all the officers here that had emergency service trained, qualified. Of course, we had some trucks. So we got them together, and in my mind, those were the only officers that were going to go down there. It was just, you just couldn't send cops, with the way they were dressed. It was just smoke and everything else. Plus, you have to remember, Building 7 was still up and burning. It was just north of the complex. The city, when they put they made their OEM offices there, they put a 500-gallon tank of diesel in the building, and that caught fire. And that building was going on, and you couldn't get close because we knew it was going to collapse, and it collapsed at 5:30 at night. Came down on it. So you had all kinds of things like that.
So Joe, you were at your CP, at your command post there at the university, and then as days passed along, did you incorporate a multi-jurisdictional command post where you all centralized together and worked in unison, or did you still just have?
No. What happened late that afternoon, or in the afternoon? The city OEM, and actually the fire department had the jurisdiction of leadership for all of this because of fire. So that big tent was set up at the VZ in West Street, a big tent. And that was a command center. On the eastern side was Broadway, was the border. The one up the Canal Street was the northern border, and the Hudson River was the west border. And I believe, I'm trying to think, the street at the south, it was 3 or 4 blocks south of that. That was the zone. Nobody could come in. The National Guard was designated by the governor. The fire department was, the lead for rescue and recovery, and to create it. It wasn't that first day, but going towards the second or third day, because of there's only so much you could do with hands and pail. They had to get heavy equipment in.
Well, I remember that when I was working, that a number of people from my department went there, as did so many others. And I was just kind of curious how that was coordinated as a central command, as far as where they could go or who they were assigned with or what their daily functions would be.
They really hooked up with a department, NYPD or us, or the fire department. And that's why, like, we had New Jersey State Police wanted to volunteer. We gave them cover. That only lasted for maybe 2 weeks.
Right.
Then we said, thank you very much, but it's time for our crews to do.
Right.
So that even that day going forward, I had my pick of who I wanted the lieutenants to work for me, the sergeants in ESU. Like I say, ESU were the only ones I let down. That first day, I actually sent cops home around 4 o'clock, 4:30. I had them sit on the bleachers, and I told them, look, you want to go there and work? I'm not going to allow it. I want you to go back to your commands, go home and get sleep, because you're going to be working a lot of overtime in the months to come.
Yeah.
How many days after 9/11 before you actually went home?
I went home that night around. I left there around, I guess, 9 o'clock at night. I went over to the command center over at Journal Square Transportation Center. I went home, and again, I never called home. I always told my wife, bad news travels fast. So I got home around, I guess, 11:45, and my sons were there, and about both of them had graduated college. One, my older guy, was so they were guys there in their early 20s that they grew up with. I was wondering, what are you doing here? So, but I went home. I woke up at 3:30, 4 o'clock, and I went back to work 5 o'clock in the morning, going to command post. So part of the decisions we made with Tom Farrell was the staffing. What we did was, again, knowing the contract, it was deemed an emergency, ordered overtime, so that there was no days off. You work 12, everyone's going to work a 12-hour tour, your normal tour, and 4 hours overtime. And your days off, you were working 12-hour tours. Your vacations, you came in work. You got paid, but you worked. That's how we covered. That lasted, and no days off. No
Right.
days off. That
So
lasted.
I want to ask you, because I had a similar experience in 1993 when Hurricane Andrew struck South Miami-Dade County. And at that time in this nation, it was the worst natural disaster in the history of the United States. And it was the same kind of thing. We went on to Alpha Bravo shifts. We worked 18-hour days for 6 months straight. But there's always that aha, oh shit moment. And that was kind of what I was getting at when I asked you about when you first went home. More so, and I guess digging in more specifically, is when you had your first moment of just quietness, your first me moment, where you could sit and reflect on this and say, holy shit, how this just changed not only so many people's lives and so many people perished, but how it changed you.
To be quite honest with you, it was probably the Friday morning following it, going to work, because you were down there, the smells and the debris. You can't even describe how gruesome it was, but just the carnage of people and property, persons. And, the Thursday, the weather wasn't great. And Friday, we had the president coming. And I literally, on the way in driving, I was stopped. And I remember I stopped at a light when you get off Route 3 to go towards the Holland Tunnel on the road. There was a light there. And I said, God, how am I going to get through this? And then I thought of my dad, who did 32 months overseas in North Africa, Sicily, D-Day, Cherbourg, Battle of the Bulge. I said, if he's going to do it, he watch over me. That was the first time it really hit me. Otherwise, it was business to do. I had things to do. I didn't have time to reflect on that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So what was your most proud moment, and then your most tragic moment?
When we finished, when the job was done, that was my most proud moment. The closing ceremony. Actually, I have a picture on the wall over me. I'm standing with Joe Esposito, the chief of NYPD, chief of the department, and Tom Pertell, who was chief of their ESU, together there. And that was the proudest, just before the closing ceremony there, because what we achieved with them.
How long ago was that, Joe, after the attacks?
The closing was in May. May 20.
May. The attacks, September, the closing in May. Wow.
That was the proudest. The day that really affected me the most is the lieutenants that I picked. And the other key thing that I did was that I took two of the most hard-headed lieutenants that I knew. That, you had, they wouldn't, they were independent, and, but I knew they would represent the PAPD. It was Billy Keegan, worked the midnights at the tent, and John Ryan, who, I could tell you, he is one big ball buster. And I put him there because I knew he's going to do it.
Right.
And I told them, look, I'm not going to be making a lot of decisions here. Here's what I want our department to do. And they understood me for having worked for me. I'm not going to be over everything. You make the decisions and you come back. And if I don't like it, I'll let you know. But that was the key decisions, those two people, because we didn't get shortchanged in representation, because they're in the first weeks there, the fire department, you needed to get a pass to go in. I said, we need a pass to get in. And then, so that it was, the way NYPD and it was butting heads, believe me. And the Port Authority, I always thought was like Switzerland. We would, get between them and try to get the best deal out of it most of the time.
Right.
So that's the kind of stuff there. The most tragic, Craig, was at Saturday morning in February, following February, where the debris got down to almost the basement, and it was the stairway that we last placed Jimmy Romito, and Captain Mazza, and there was Lizinski was one of the police officers, and they were rescuing a woman when it collapsed, and we found their bodies. So actually, I came in. It was early in the morning. I came in to take part, taking them out, and the only way we identified Romito was by teeth in the stomach, and his name from his utility shirt that he had on. That's the way it was two bodies. You talk about how gruesome. Kathy Mazza was one of them, as was Officer Hutchko. We didn't find out till we got the bodies up to the fire department morgue at the top that they thought it was one body. Their bodies were entwined, the ribs. Okay. That's the kind of stuff you were finding. And what was, I can never say enough about the cops that worked there, the fire department, and all the construction workers, what they had to put up, what they put up with, and what they saw. My youngest guy ended up working for Tully down there. Again, I was blessed that my godson, who I hadn't seen in 4 or 5 years, he was the job boss for Tully. And the whole site was cut into 4 quadrants. So he had 1 quadrant with Tully. My son ended up working for him, and he stayed in construction to this day. But Ed, and we had it in. We never told anybody we were connected, so that if we needed to get something in or quicken them, it worked. So you talk about connections, that was important.
I remember the story about Kathy Mazza. She was the head of the police academy there for the Port Authority, a captain when she perished. And I remember the story, the woman you mentioned that she was helping get out of the tower. Basically, she knew the tower was about to collapse, and she knew that she was about to die. And she ordered her other officers who were with her at the time, trying to assist this woman who was incapable of walking on her own. She ordered them out of the building so that they could spare their own lives. But she knew that she was going to remain with this woman till the end. And she knew the end was probably coming soon, and she would probably die along with the woman who couldn't get out. Quite a story. Heroism. Unbelievable. Help me understand, Joe. I know we're nearing the end and we got to wrap this up, but there's one thing that always I wondered, and that is, when did it go from a rescue effort to a recovery effort? We kind of moved along, but at some point you must have thought, okay, there's still people that we can rescue. Maybe these officers who were missing initially, maybe they're not dead. Maybe we can recover them and rescue them before the end. When did all that change? Because I was there a week after the attacks, and as I understood it then, there was still hope that maybe you would find some people that were still alive in the rubble.
Realistically, that following Saturday, in my own mind, it was just because of what you were finding. You weren't finding whole bodies. The people that were alive, we had the 2 cops rescued the next morning.
John McLaughlin, is that right?
Correct. You had a gentleman that came out at 8:00, and it was a Marine that went down. So that we were finding were pieces of bodies. That first day, like we found one of our officers, Howard. He got hit in the head with a falling while he was at a command post with the fire department, with Dancy, the chief of the fire department. He was with them when they got hit with debris when the South Tower came down. And I had seen them they were about 12 yards west of me. They were in the southbound lanes of West Street, and I was in the northbound lane. I saw it, and I turned. That's from the South Tower debris. What protected me from the South Tower was the bridge. It stopped the debris from going further north. That's what I tested. But
and I think that you should be absolutely credited. I'm sure that this has come up before, that you made the right choice and the right decision, and that you had the foreknowledge to pick that spot, knowing that that would be the safest place?
That's probably, when I look back, Greg, that's probably the best decision I made, that when I first got there, that just myself and Seppi would go. And I told them, don't go any place, because you would have talked, another 40 cops or 30 cops when I look back.
Right. You could have
That was probably,
led them
what
in harm's way.
exercise, again, I learned from working with it. My job, again, is you should go off the ranks, it's command and control. It's not my job. The ones that got before me, it was their job to go rescue people. I could tell by what was there. There was no people for me to rescue. It was all, people, that's their job. So, and that was subconscious. But that's probably the best decision I made, with not letting them go. And like I said, it changed the way police or anybody go towards these things. You got to create. You got to send people in to be like the miners send the birds in to die. You have to.
Yeah. So question here, we all know, those of us that were working or alive at that time of 9/11, we know how it affected the country. We know how it affected New York. We know how it affected multiple families and people and whatnot. How did it affect you? How did your life change from 9/10 to 9/11?
Bill, there's one thing also that was important that afternoon, and they showed up on their own. You had people to come in for psychological, cops to cops. They came, and I made every cop, and even myself, sit down and talk with this. And we developed a program, again, very close with the Port Authority Risk Management and Medical Department, to bring people in. And we created a program so that helped. The other motion, there was one of my neighbors who was one cops to cop, he was a lieutenant in Glen Ridge, had told me that in Oklahoma City, 19 rescue workers committed suicide. And I made up with that. That's not going to happen. So that the Port Authority, that's another thing, there's a lot of things, but we instituted a program. And when we were closing down, all the commands during that whole period were seeing people. We had daily people going and talking to psychological and direct. And at the end of the operations down at the site, in October, we also did closed out. We didn't let any cop come. We had the guys, we picked who we wanted there, 75 or 100 cops that worked there to rest from October till we closed down in May, because the lieutenants picked them. They said they're ready. So we had debriefing that took place with cops to cops, with Jim Reese from the FBI. When I met before that, he came to give Port Authority High Command talking about retirement in August of 2000. But we did that program, and I could say with great pride, after all of this, one Port Authority police officer committed suicide since that day, and her suicide had nothing to do with 9/11. So that's something with time I'm proud of.
Absolutely.
We've lost people with diseases and stuff, but not one person has committed suicide.
Yeah, that's an amazing achievement right there.
So I'm just curious, what was that counseling that you provided? Was that mandatory or was it voluntary?
No, mandatory out at the commands. That program was mandatory to go to. Actually, it was conducted at 2 days at Marriott hotels, and we fed them. And after the first day, you had a dinner. They can invite their wives. Their wives or partners would come to the dinner. And the next day, part of the counseling involved them also, so that it was, well planned out. And again, Port Authority put out the monies and everything needed. Working with our risk management people, we had the right breathing gears, the right masks they brought for us. We were whatever they could do for us, medical and risk management got the equipment. The Port Authority did what they had to do to take care of it.
Joe, you lost 37 officers on 9/11. You had many months long recovery effort, many of your officers at Ground Zero, some of whom unfortunately have died of diseases related to their work at Ground Zero and breathing in the toxins during that difficult time. I'm just curious, the department today is thriving. I think there's great pride in the fact that you are working for the Port Authority, Police Department of New York and New Jersey. You're following in the footsteps of those who died on 9/11. But in those months after 9/11, what was the well-being of your officers? Was that the toughest challenge? Or how would you describe the challenges, the toughest challenge you faced to rebuild this department after such a tragedy?
Again, Port Authority was unique where could talk to again, 9/11, after 9/11, when I became the chief, Port Authority high executives were in the same police area. They lost their offices. So that the interrelationship that I had wasn't just business, but it was personal. We knew each other. So that we worked to get everything done. Again, we had an existing list of 7,000 people on it, and I needed to rush people through it, but it was an old list, 5 years. We identified who were active police officers, and we put them in the first class. We from a ninth or 23 week course, or 26, we went down to 10 for active police officers. And we worked with the union because even if you're on that list to get on, you had seniority rights. So we worked with the unions for the funds. So you had that working. So that when we needed the classes, I had, the medical was there to do the testing for the human resources to do all the administrative work, and the academy, the Fairleigh Dickinson. Now, the other key thing that I had was, again, it's always the people. And the deputy director of public safety, Mike Scott, he survived. He was on the phone with Fred Moreau, and Fred's last word was, "Oh shit," when the building came down. Poor Mike was on the phone with him. But Mike was, 25-year pro with the Port Authority. He ran the PATH trains, was chief superintendent, was on the ethics board for 20 years. And I tell people, I was the cop or the teenager, and he was the businessman, because he took care of all the logistics, the rentals, the cost, contractors, contract. That was key. And to this day, we are best of friends. We even went into the TSA when we retired together, and we both recognized that madness. But
Chief,
that's how things got done. People.
Let me, Dennis, I'm going to turn it over to you to close it, but let me just say that today the Port Authority is bigger and stronger than ever. The Port Authority Police Department of New York and New Jersey. And Joe Morris, you're the man responsible for that, the fact that they're thriving today after such a devastating loss and tragedy on 9/11. So I'm proud to be your friend, sir. I'm so glad you joined us here on Heroes Behind the Badge, because you are truly a hero behind the badge.
Ed Setner, who's the superintendent of police now, retired Jersey State Police, who was injured. He has injuries from 9/11 when they went, the rescue recovery, when they volunteered to go, injured. But he's always the most respect, and anything he wants, anything I want, he gives to me. So I get the most respect. And you know what? I was blessed. As I said, some people said it's like winning the lottery when you became a PA cop. I was blessed to have seen the ad in the paper while cleaning a window and trying to take the test. I look back. That's how I became a PA cop.
Chief, you're a great storyteller. We could go on and on and on. Boy, you have the stories. And, I want to thank you for coming on and retell. I'm sure you've told this story hundreds of times.
No, not a lot.
Well, I'm glad. Maybe we're one of the first. We got the inside scoop, guys, because we can't ever forget what happened. And as we said at the beginning, a lot of people that are alive today have no direct knowledge of this. This is how we keep people informed of the heroic activities by our police and our fire department on 9/11. So thank you for coming with us on Heroes Behind the Badge. Thank you also for your decades, your over three decades of service to the people of New York and New Jersey. And, you know, I look at the terrible loss of life, the terrible destruction, the whole concept. I remember we all remember what we were doing when this happened. But, we got to remember that tens of thousands of people survived. And of your 400 officers, God forbid, 37 passed, but most of your officers on the scene survived. So, the terrible, tremendous loss of life overshadows that. But you guys that were out there on the scene did a lot of things right. And let's not forget that. And it's great.
It's the people, but it was the people in the Port Authority in the right spots that, civilians and the evacuation drills and everything else. That's why most people survived. The numbers it worked. It was just, if you look at who died, it was above where the planes hit.
Yeah,
that's where most of the deaths were.
Which was almost a death sentence from the beginning.
Absolutely.
There was not much you could do, but you guys did an unbelievable job. You and your team clearly are heroes behind the badge. You exemplify exactly what this podcast stands for. So thanks again for joining us. I wish all of our audience, please go to follow, like, okay, you can hit the little buttons wherever you get your podcast, because that tells us that you like what we're doing. If you like something that Joe Morris said today, please follow, like, or subscribe to Heroes Behind the Badge podcast. We'll see you next time on Heroes Behind the Badge.